Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Today, we are going to be reviewing the Wuthering Waves 3.0 story. I wanted to wait till the entire story was out before I gave a full review this time around. And yeah, I'll be giving you my thoughts on the story, some things I liked, didn't like, overall thoughts on, I guess, Wuthering Waves writing, story stuff in general. And yeah, I'm excited to start up the story reviews again this year. I think that they're a nice way for me to talk to you guys about how I feel about certain things while being honest and open about, yeah, just like stuff, I guess. Sorry, right now it is 7:30 a.m. We just finished watching the 3.1 special program and I did not sleep. So I am a little bit all over the place, but I did write down notes for things I want to talk about. So hopefully it'll be, you know, still comprehensive and everything. So yeah, anyways, that's what we're doing today. So let me know how you guys feel about anything I talk about today down in the comments down below. Agree, disagree, love to hear it. Also, feel free to like, subscribe if you do enjoy. I'd really appreciate that. And also join the Discord server if you want to come chat, hang out, and have a good time. And apart from that, let's just get started and let's just hop right into it. 3.0. I overall quite enjoyed 3.0. There were some things in the story in terms of like the writing that I think could have been better, but I think for an introduction to the brand new region overall, it was really, really solid. Wuwa always does an amazing job at the presentation and really making us feel like we are experiencing a very cinematic masterpiece, I guess. And they definitely did the same with Lahai Roy in a lot of the things that they introduced. So we'll start off with some pros since I'm already talking about them. So yeah, it was a super cool intro to the new region. The music, cinematography was amazing. I actually really liked at the very beginning, we immediately after entering the region got thrown into that worm fight, right? We got thrown into that whole thing where we were trying to escape from the worm with Lynae, which was super, super sick and also very exciting, very good hook to grab your interest into what's going on here. So yeah, I thought that was super, super cool. And then I think Lynae and Mornye as characters are also very interesting. Their storylines were very cool as well. And I actually really, really liked things that they did with their backstories. And I think that they offered quite a bit to building up the overarching story and also offering lore and insight into things that are going on, such as Lynae and New Federation, right? Lynae's New Federation roots I thought were super, super cool to see. And it's also one of the first times we get to really see a perspective of the New Federation from someone who is directly there, and it was super, super cool. And I'm sure we're gonna get way more New Federation later as well, so it's a very nice introduction to see if through Lynae's story there. And then also Mornye's story, right? Mornye's overall story I think was a really interesting way to get to see into the dynamics of Lahai Roy, the academy, some of the politics and, you know, I guess powers at play and how they interact and clash. So I thought Mornye also offered a lot on that front. So yeah, I think overall their stories themselves and what they offered were really cool. I do think that the execution of them could have been a bit better in certain ways, but I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, so I mean, based also like to follow up on that point, the previous point of their stories being interesting, I also think that their plot lines, their backstories were really good. They did a good job of info dumping on us because we're in a completely new region, right? They did have to tell us a lot of things about what's going on, but it didn't feel like I was being info dumped on. At no point in 3.0 did I really feel like they were just narrating to me what I was supposed to learn in this new region, because it was pretty well intertwined with the, you know, stories of Lynae and Mornye and what was happening with the Exostrider and the Academy. So I thought that was a pretty good, pretty solid. And also there was also a lot of really good lore and setup overall. The Shaper was pretty interesting, and that entire thing with the, oh, I forgot what they're called, but yeah, like the people, the race, what were they called, guys? The Royas. Yeah, the Royas. They did some really good setup with the Royas as another not faction, but another group of people, and their dynamics with the Academy and just the overall Lahai region too. I thought that was very well done, very well set up. There were also, like, it wasn't perfect. There were some things I wish they could have done better there, but I'll also go into that a bit more later. But yeah, we also learned a lot about the Extra Strider and just, you know, as a whole, the powers at play in Lahai Roi. So I thought that was really, really nice. It was also fun to play. Just overall, it was super fun to play 3.0 as a whole in the main story. And also the final boss was super sick. I personally enjoyed the final boss. I thought it was super fun, and also a really nice little twist on the introduction to the region too, right? We start off Lahai Roi with the fight with the worm, and then we essentially, the final boss, get a fight with that worm, but then with more variations to it, right? Like a more complex fight too. So it's like they took their initial thing and then they kind of brought it back full circle at the end, and then like twisted it a bit and made it feel fresh. So that was really nice. Yeah. Overall, just a really, really fun story to play through, and very solid setup, lore, things like that. Characters interesting. And yeah. So yeah, those are the pros for the story that I found and I really, really enjoyed. For the cons, my main con was mostly with some of the writing. And this does extend to the way that wuwa overall does write its main story quest, I think. So this will be a bit more of a generalization on that, but I will give some specific examples. In 3.0 specifically, I feel like Mornye and Lynae's storyline splits, the way that they structured it made it feel a little bit unsatisfying overall, I would say. What do I mean by that? So basically, the first half of the story was completely like Lynae's storyline. So we had her introduction, her arc, her conclusion, essentially, in the first half of the story. And then the second half of the story, we had essentially the same thing. I know we technically saw Mornye in the first half, but we just said hi to her. And then we basically did everything important with her in the second half, right? So it kind of like followed that same structure of like, we get to know Mornye better. We learn a bit more about her. We go through the story, and then it like concludes, right? And in those two separate halves. And I feel like doing the story like that left me kind of feeling a bit unsatisfied actually at the end of Mornye's half, because we spend so little time with these characters that are brand new, where it ends up feeling like their storylines are so isolated from one another. And then also you just don't have enough time to really develop everything that's going on between them. So it just feels like they're just telling us two companion quests, essentially. I think that's the main complaint that I saw a lot of people have, which I have actually had for quite a few of the Wuthering Waves stories overall, is that these two quests, the way they were structured, okay? Let me be clear. It's not necessarily the plot of the storylines, but the way they structured the storylines that made them feel very companion questy, and rather than a main story. I think one of the reasons being is that it kind of makes it feel like there's a lack of community within the Wuthering Waves world. Because Lynae and Mornye, obviously, they have mentioned multiple times in the story that they have a relationship outside of, they have a relationship within the school. Mornye is Lynae's professor, and they know each other and they interact with one another, but we barely get to see it. The only reason we know that is because they kind of mention each other here and there, right, to us as a separate character. But I think it would have been cool to see more interactions between Lynae and Mornye, actually get to see them work together to essentially like do the exact same things that happened in the story, just I guess stretched out a bit more throughout the patch overall, if that makes sense. Like I think that 3.0, they could have very easily intertwined Mornye and Lynae's particular storylines, because they kind of ran parallel to one another within the story, right? Like Lynae's entire thing is, she's kind of trying to find her own redemption. She's trying to find her place in the school as herself and not as an imposter. And then Mornye is obviously working towards making the ceremony take place and happen properly. So why not have, throughout the entirety of 3.0, we have Lynae, helping us, right? I know they squeezed all of Lynae's helping and redemption in the first half, but why not just have her, periodically, or like while we're going through all of this stuff with Mornye, while we are trying to fix and make sure that there are no issues with the solar ceremony, we have Lynae alongside us, feeding us information, working with us to do this investigation, because that is her expertise. She's very good at it. And then we also get to see And then we get to, you know, interact with Mornye as well at the same time, being like, okay, Mornye is telling us about her side of things, where we're seeing like some of the conflicts, the issues that are going on with the more technical side of the ceremony. And then, so we have Lynae feeding us clues. We have Mornye, you know, working out the semantics. And then maybe they kind of also share information. And then by the end of 3.0, right, Lynae, Mornye literally called Lynae to help at the end of 3.0. So why not have that more directly in front of us? We get to see Lynae helping us and Mornye. All of our work that we have been doing throughout 3.0 come together in the end to essentially, you know, save the ceremony, manage to get it in the sky, and then, you know, be able to like fix the sun and make sure that it goes without a hitch. And then, you know, that is the thing that causes them to acknowledge Lynae and her efforts, you know? It's literally like all of the plot remains the same. Nothing changes in either of their stories, except for the fact that you just combine it into one. You just combine it into one story, you know? And you just stretch it out a bit more rather than just focusing only on Lynae in one half and then only on Mornye in the second half. Why not focus on both characters in both halves, right? I think a very good example of how of a Wuthering Waves story where they did a really good job of this was actually 2.4, I think. The one with Lupa and Cardathia. In that storyline, that was the first time they did a split, right? The first time they did a first half, second half split. But if you look at that story, yes, it focuses very hard on Lupa, and it also focuses very hard on Cardathia overall. But we essentially get to see both of them involved with that story throughout the beginning of 2.4 to the end of 2.4. And then at the end of 2.4, it comes together in a very satisfying way, where all of the efforts of Lupa, all of the efforts of Cardathia, and then of them also working together come through. And then we have this conclusion where we all gather and we're like, we did it, guys. We did it. We managed to stop Cristoforo this time. And it was great. And it felt natural. 2.4 to me is still one of my favorite stories in wuwa because it is the first time that we really get to see that kind of world building. We really get to see that community in the world, right? Because we get to see more character interactions with one another. And I thought that was super sick. And yeah, whereas like in 3.0, it felt more like, to me, the Augusta Yuno patch, 2.6, where it was once again very first half, second half, where in 2.6 in particular, I won't get too deep into it, but you know, Augusta and Yuno very clearly have a very close relationship from working together for so many years, and yet we don't get to see that at all in the story. They just tell us that it exists, but then we never get to see that in front of our eyes. And I feel like that's such a missed opportunity. Because seeing those interactions, again, just kind of builds the world. It makes it feel more alive. It makes it feel more like the characters exist as individuals within Solera 6, rather than just characters that we spend some time with to get attached to and then never see again. Yeah, that's my personal gripe with 3.0. Again, plot was great, but I just, why, you know, just like intertwine it more. Intertwine the plot more. And you have a really, really solid base, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I feel with regards to the pacing of the story, is that I do feel like that caused both of their stories to feel a lot more shallow than they actually were if you look at the content of the stories. And also, I guess this is also in particular to Mornye's story as well. I love Mornye to death. I think she has an amazing backstory, amazing purpose, and a really, really, really sweet personality. But when I look at her story in game in the second half of 3.0, I actually feel like it didn't really show us that much about her. Most of my attachment to Mornye actually comes from her character trailer. I feel like I learned so much about Mornye in her character trailer, so much about her motives, her passion, her perspective, her backstory. They gave us everything in her character trailer, and then in the main story, they just like kind of like briefly touched on it, but then had her obviously focusing on the task at hand, which is fine in itself. But I feel like had I not seen the character trailer, I would honestly not really know that much about Mornye at all. And I do think that that is a miss, because the quest itself, the way it's structured, already felt like a companion quest. So then if it's structured like a companion quest, then why do I feel like I actually didn't really learn much about my companion in the story? Does that make sense? I don't know. That's how I feel. I think trailers should enhance the story experience, but they shouldn't be necessarily necessary to be able to understand a character fully. And that's one of the big losses, right? One of the reasons why I feel like it's a huge loss is because they stopped doing companion quests, as far as we are aware, in wuwa, the game itself. So then now they're kind of forced to put all of this lore in these trailers outside of the game, in this separate piece of media. So then now it's like you're kind of relying on trailers to tell you lore as well, rather than them being able to just further elaborate on maybe some other points and give you more insight into what you already know about a character. Rather than doing that, it's just telling you everything about the character. That's kind of how I feel. I really do think that they should bring companion quests back to allow us to have those types of in-depth developments with characters, especially if they are, trying to focus a bit more on the lore, like in particular, right? In 3.0, they did focus more on the lore with Mornye, which I'm totally fine with. Again, I just think it was a pacing issue, which made it not really have that much impact at the end. I think that's kind of like my general thoughts on the current wuwa story as a whole. And then it really did come into play in 3.0. Oh yeah, okay, listen. 3.0 is just an intro, okay? So to be completely fair to Wuthering Waves, 3.0 is just an intro to the region. So who knows? Maybe this was just them trying to set up a bunch of lore. Again, I think they still could have done the exact same thing with a bit more of a connected storyline between the two of them. But maybe they will, hear the feedback, because I know there are a lot of people who are starting to get a little bit tired of this whole see the character and then never see them again. So, maybe, hopefully, Kuro will listen to the feedback and reconsider the way that they write some of the future story, because I think they're perfectly capable of writing a really interesting story quest, as evidenced by the actual plot that exists in the game and the actual lore. They just need to figure out how to present it better in terms of the way it's written. I think that's really all they need. If they can figure that out and be able to create that community, show more of the future characters, show more of the past characters across the patches, really see how everyone is working together throughout the story, it'll leave the finales a lot more impactful, right? Like we got to see glimpses of that in 2.7. We got to see glimpses of everyone working together in 2.7, coming together at the end. But imagine we actually got to see that throughout the entirety of 2.x, right? 2.7 would have been 10 times more impactful, I think, than it was if we really got to feel that, holy shit, everyone has been actually working so hard behind the scenes together, to bring this all together, and it all accumulates into this really big grand finale, Avenger style, and then it's super sick. So yeah, anyways, sorry, I know this has been a bit of a mess of video. I'm really tired. I'm so sorry. I really would love to do this when I am on more sleep, but unfortunately I have to catch a flight in literally 5 hours. So I am very pressed on time. I'm actually attending the New York event, so by the time you guys see this video, I might be there. So to follow up on the whole world building, community building aspect of the wuwa story, I actually think 2.0 did a decent job at that, because remember when we first entered Resonators, right, we got to meet obviously Miss Carlotta, but then we also got to meet Brant, we got to meet Rochia, we got to meet Phoebe, and we actually got to see all of them kind of working together, doing their own thing separately and also together to work towards, at the time, what we assumed to be a specific goal, right? Which was, trying to figure out what was going on with Fenrico and the Order. I think that was pretty cool, because we got to see them all working together for basically around 2 patches, 2.0, 2.1. It was still only 2 patches, but it's better than some other patches, obviously. And yeah, and again, 2.7 was really sick to see all the characters, but did lack the full impact of it because of, the issues that we mentioned before. So yeah, I think it's hard to stay attached to characters in wuwa because they are so fleeting in the grand scheme of things, or at least they feel very fleeting. And if this is the direction that they do choose to write their story in, then that is their choice. But I just think that it is a huge loss since the world of wuwa is so rich and so full of life and has so much to offer for in terms of its story and lore and everything that's going on. I feel like if they just really capitalize on being able to do that world building even more, it would be so fantastic. And it would feel less like there is a lack of substance to the overall story because there's so many good plot lines. So they just need to make us really more invested in them. And one way to do that is obviously with a bit more of a overarching longevity to characters within their role in the story. And hopefully that will also prevent them from, you know, like nipping a lot of plot lines in the bud too, right? You get to see more characters throughout. Then we will get to see stuff like, you know, the resolution of the Phasalia-Montelli conflict, right? They built up this huge conflict between the Montelli and Phasalia families in 2.x, only for them to essentially off-screen the resolution. And for them to just mention later, oh yeah, it's like, you know, we resolved this after the Phasalia, after the Cantarella companion quest, right? So it's like they set up so many amazing plot lines, they set up so many amazing ideas, but then end up kind of half-baking a lot of them and just doing away with them because they go on to focus on the next shiny character. So hopefully they can listen to our critique, and please, because if they can really just fix that one particular thing in the wuwa story, which is being able to make it a bit more cohesive with the story, with the character involvement, then I really think that wuwa would be on a completely other level. Everything else that they do with the story, the way they present it, the way they're constantly innovating, the gameplay, making it fun, creative, it's just next level. So if they can elevate the writing to the next level as well, then it would be amazing. It would be amazing. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. And I guess, okay, let's tie it off with the final score. So yeah, like my final score for wuwa 3.0, I would say is the first half. I do give the first half like around an 8, I would say, because I really liked Lynae's story. I loved her backstory, and I like how her backstory can tie into the story later. I mean, will they bring it back to the plot? We'll see. But it was a very, very solid tease. So yeah, second half of 3.0, I'd give it like a 7. I'd give it like a 7. Just because it did end up lacking a lot of impact for me. Everything that was going on because of the pacing issues, so it didn't hit as hard, even though there were some really cool stuff like the boss fight, and also I love Mornye as a character. I loved seeing her separate perspective for that brief moment, you know, when she went to the lab. But I just wish we could have seen like more of that, more stuff like that from the overall story. And then so I guess my overall 3.0 score would then be a 7.5 as a whole, I would say, for the story itself. So yeah, I think that's where I am right now, after having sat on it for a few days. And yeah, so I guess like as just to close this video off, sorry, I've been ranting for quite a bit. Hopefully this was comprehensive. I'm really sorry. Next time I do a story review, I will be on proper sleep. I promise. I promise, wuwa fans. But yeah, anyways, 3.0 I think was an overall very solid introduction to the new region. Very fun, very beautiful, and very enjoyable to go through. It was an amazing execution of the new region, and gameplay experience was fantastic. But the pacing made it feel a bit lackluster. The pacing of the story made it feel a bit lackluster, even though they were doing some amazing stuff with the plot and introduced some amazing lore and setup for later. So yeah, I'm very excited. I'm still very excited for the overall 3.x story, because again, the setup that they've done for the lore has been fantastic. So hopefully if they listen to our feedback and can kind of like, you know, iron out some of the crinkles in the way they're writing the story, we will be able to see some absolute peak cinema coming up. So yeah. Those are my overall thoughts about 3.0 and its story. Please let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. I would love to hear everyone's differing opinions. I know some people agree with me. I know some people also disagree with me. So let me know where you guys are, or if there's anything that you guys, you know, think that I didn't mention. I'd love to hear that as well. And also, yeah, like, subscribe if you did enjoy it. Super appreciate it. And join the Discord server if you want to come chat, hang out, have a good time. And apart from that, thank you so much for watching YouTube. Take care. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!